It was one of those clear spring mornings, the kind that makes you forget your back still aches from the winter chill. I'd been up since 7, sipping lukewarm coffee in my kitchen while making a mental list of everything I had to pack. My lease was ending, and I was finally downsizing after 23 years in the same place. It wasn't easy letting go of a home where memories clung to every chipped corner and worn cabinet handle. But I was ready. Or so I told myself. The company had offered a moving stipend, which helped. But it didn't come with extra hands, and I knew better than to try to lift heavy boxes on my own. I'd already pinched something in my shoulder last week from carrying my old printer down to the car. So when my boss, Miriam, called to check on how the move was going and casually offered to send her son over to help, I said yes before I really thought it through. I knew of Jason. We'd met once at a holiday event at the office. He brought his mother a new scarf and stayed mostly quiet, though I remembered thinking how striking he was. He had that quiet confidence some men grow into in their 30s. The kind that doesn't need to prove anything. A few polite exchanges, a handshake, and that was it. I didn't expect much when Miriam said he'd be over by 10. At exactly 9:58, the doorbell rang. I opened the door, and there he was, tall with that same calm energy, dressed in worn jeans and a faded flannel shirt. His sleeves were rolled up, and he had a small tool bag slung over one shoulder. He smiled when I opened the door, a real smile, not one of those polite office ones. "I'm Miss Harper Wright," he said, offering his hand again. "I'm Jason. My mom said you could use a bit of muscle today." I laughed, stepping aside. "Call me Diane." And yes, desperately. I may have overestimated my ability to move a lifetime of clutter by myself. He stepped in, looking around the living room, which was now dominated by stacks of half-packed boxes, some sealed, others still open with flaps, sticking up like little paper wings. "You've done a lot already." "I've done all the easy stuff," I said. "What's left are the things I've been putting off. You know, old files, books, photo albums, the garage." Jason grinned. "Sounds like we're in for some dusty memories." He rolled up his sleeves a bit higher and got to work. I pointed out what needed lifting and packing, trying not to hover. But something about his presence unsettled me. Not in a bad way, but in a way that made me unusually aware of the quiet moments between us. Like when he handed me a framed photo that had slipped behind a cabinet. It was of me and my late husband, back when we'd first bought this house. Jason looked at it a moment before passing it to me. "You look happy here." I nodded. We were. It was a long time ago. He passed away 8 years back. "I'm sorry," he said gently. "That kind of loss. It never really leaves you, does it?" "No," I admitted, fingers tracing the edge of the frame. "It becomes part of you, like a second heartbeat." The moment passed quietly and we continued working. But something had shifted. There was a softness in how he looked at me after that. A kind of quiet respect I hadn't expected. We spent the next hour in the garage, sorting through boxes of old tools, paint cans, and things I hadn't touched in years. He found an old wood carving I'd forgotten about, a project I'd started in my early 40s and never finished. "You made this?" he asked, holding it up. It was rough, a little uneven, but not bad for a beginner. I did. I used to love working with my hands. Life got in the way. He studied it a little longer. "You should get back into it. You've got an eye for form." It was such a small compliment, but it landed deeper than it should have. Maybe it was the way he said it. Not like he was just trying to be polite, but like he genuinely meant it. Like he saw something I hadn't shown in years. By noon, we'd made real progress. The living room was almost cleared out, and I insisted he take a break. I brewed fresh coffee and made us both turkey sandwiches, and we sat at the small table near the kitchen window. So I asked, trying to make casual conversation, "What do you do when you're not helping your mom's coworkers move house?" He chuckled. "I work freelance, design consulting, some architecture, mostly interior renovation, small projects, nothing glamorous." "That explains the tool bag," I said. "You've got the hands of someone who builds things." Jason looked at me for a moment, his expression unreadable. "I like creating spaces that make people feel something, not just functional, but personal, like they belong." I nodded slowly. That's a rare thing these days. For a while, we just sat in silence, eating and watching the wind stir the trees outside. Don't know what it was about that moment. The quiet, the sense of shared understanding, the way he looked at me, not with pity, but with interest, with presence. Then, out of nowhere, he asked, "Was it hard?" Letting go of the house. I didn't answer right away. Yes, but not for the reasons people think. It's not the walls or the yard or the floor plan. It's the ghosts. They're quiet, but they don't like change. He smiled, not mocking, just thoughtful. Sometimes it takes someone new to make peace with the ghosts. That sentence stayed with me. Long after we returned to packing, long after he carried the last heavy box into the hallway, even as he was getting ready to leave, dust on his shirt and a bead of sweat at his temple, I found myself not wanting the day to end. "Thank you again," I said, walking him to the door. "Any time," he replied. Then he paused. "Actually, would you be okay if I came back tomorrow? I have some time, and it seems like we've only just started." I felt something stir in my chest. Maybe it was gratitude. Maybe it was curiosity. Maybe it was something I hadn't felt in a long, long time. "I'd like that," I said quietly. "I'd like that very much." As the door closed behind him, I leaned against it, heart unexpectedly fluttering. The boxes weren't the only thing shifting today. Something inside me was moving too. The next morning, I caught myself brushing my hair a little longer than usual. I even put on a soft rose-tinted lipstick I hadn't touched in months. Not because I was trying to impress Jason, at least that's what I told myself, but because it felt good to care again. There was a strange new energy in the house, like the air had shifted just enough to wake something sleeping inside me. Jason arrived around 10:30, a few minutes later than the day before. I almost laughed at how relieved I felt when I saw him standing on the porch with that same relaxed smile and a tray of iced coffees in hand. "Thought you might like something cold today," he said, offering one to me. "You're already spoiling me," I replied, taking the drink gratefully. "Keep this up and I'll have to put you on the payroll." "Fair trade," he said. "You feed me sandwiches. I lift things. We call it even." We started in the bedroom closet, the last real mountain to climb before I could feel the move was truly underway. It was packed with old clothes I hadn't worn in decades, boxes of keepsakes, and a drawer full of mismatched scarves I didn't have the heart to throw away. As Jason pulled out the heavier bins, I sat on the edge of the bed sorting through a pile of old journals. At one point, I opened a small velvet box I didn't recognize. Inside was a delicate silver bracelet my husband had given me for our 15th anniversary. I hadn't seen it in years. My breath caught in my throat. Jason noticed. You okay? I nodded, but didn't speak for a moment. The bracelet felt cool and light in my palm, but the memory behind it carried a weight I hadn't expected. I turned it over and read the engraving on the back, still us, always. My husband gave me this the year before he died, I said finally, my voice softer than I intended. We were in a rough patch. Work, health, life. It was all crowding in. And then one night he handed me this. No grand speech or anything. Just a quiet look and this bracelet. Jason sat beside me, not too close, but near enough that I felt the warmth of his presence. He sounds like he really saw you. He did, I whispered, even when I didn't see myself. We sat there in the quiet for a while. No rush. No need to fill the silence. That was something rare. A man who knew how to let silence be comfortable. Then he said something that caught me off guard. You know, I never really saw my mom this way, as someone who had a life before me. Before work. Before being a mother. I turned to look at him. It's easy to forget, isn't it? That people have layers. That we weren't always the roles we play. He nodded slowly. Maybe that's what I like about helping you move. It's not just boxes, it's stories. Pieces of who you were and who you still are. There was a tenderness in his words that wrapped around my chest and settled there. I didn't quite know how to respond, so I smiled and handed him a box of old records. If you want to know who I was, this might help. He laughed, flipping through the stack. Fleetwood Mac, Joni Mitchell, Carole King. You've got taste. You think I'd be the kind of woman who packed up her music last? I teased. He looked at me then, really looked, and said, I think you're the kind of woman who saved the most important parts for last. Something in the way he said it made my cheeks warm. I wasn't used to being seen that way anymore. Not just as someone's employee or neighbor, but as a woman with a whole history behind her. We worked for a few more hours, each moment feeling a little more familiar, a little more shared. At one point, while reaching for a box on the top shelf, I lost my balance just slightly. Jason caught me by the waist, steadying me before I could stumble. For a second, we were face to face, close enough that I could see the flecks of green in his hazel eyes. He didn't let go right away. Neither did I. Careful, he said, his voice low. You don't want to get hurt. I'm fine, I murmured, but the truth was, I wasn't so sure. There was something fragile in that moment, not just physical closeness, but something deeper, emotional, and it scared me more than I wanted to admit. Later, as we sat down for lunch, I caught him watching me. Not in a way that made me uncomfortable, but in a way that made me feel wanted, like I was still visible in a world that often looked past women like me. You have a very calm energy, I said, breaking the silence. He smiled. It's a defense mechanism. I overthink everything, so I try to at least look calm on the outside. That's a good trick, I said. You should teach it to me. He laughed. Somehow I think you've got more strength than you let on. The compliment lingered between us. I didn't deflect it the way I usually did. I let it settle, absorb, warm me from within. By the time he was packing up to leave, the sun had dipped lower, casting golden light through the blinds. He paused at the door, turning back toward me. I'll be around tomorrow if you still need help. I too, I said softly, but not just with the boxes. Jason held my gaze, something unsaid flickering in his eyes. And I'll see you tomorrow. The door closed behind him, and I stood there in the fading light, feeling something shift again, a possibility, tentative but real. The boxes were slowly emptying, but something else inside me was just beginning to fill. The next day felt different. The house, once cluttered with boxes and the echo of memories, had started to feel strangely open. Not just physically, but emotionally. There was room now for breath, for thought, for something new. Jason arrived just after 10. The same soft knock on the door, the same casual smile. This time he didn't bring coffee. Instead, he held a small paperback. "Thought you might like these," he said, handing it to me as I opened the door. Inside were 2 freshly baked croissants from a little cafe near downtown, still warm. "Now you're definitely spoiling me," I said, stepping aside to let him in. "You've earned it," he replied. "You've been holding the weight of this place for a long time." We ate breakfast standing at the counter, the way old friends do without ceremony. The kitchen, with its chipped countertops and faded wallpaper, somehow felt cozy again, like it was remembering how to be a home. Afterward, we moved to the sunroom. There were only a few boxes left there, mostly filled with old art supplies, canvases, brushes, half-used tubes of acrylic paint. Jason crouched next to one of the boxes and pulled out a small, unfinished landscape. The brush strokes were bold, a little messy, but filled with emotion. "Did you paint this?" he asked. I hesitated, then nodded. "Years ago, before everything got too noisy." He held it carefully, like it mattered. "It's beautiful. You have a strong hand." "I used to. Haven't touched a brush in over a decade." "Why not?" I shrugged, suddenly aware of the dull ache in my chest. I think I stopped giving myself permission to make things just for me. Life gets busy, then it gets quiet, and somewhere in between, you forget who you were. Jason leaned against the doorframe, still holding the painting. "You should start again, not for anyone else, just for you." His words landed softly, like a stone dropped in water. I didn't reply. I didn't need to. You could see it on my face, that strange mix of grief and longing. We spent the afternoon in a rhythm that felt almost sacred. He carried, I sorted. We shared stories about silly childhood injuries and old relationships that hadn't quite worked out. There was no pressure to impress, no pretenses, just 2 people existing honestly in the same space. At one point, while lifting a box together, our hands touched. Neither of us moved away. "You've got paint on your fingers," he said, smiling. I was digging through the art supplies. "It suits you." That simple sentence did something to me. I didn't know what to say, so I didn't. But my eyes lingered on his face longer than they should have. I noticed the light dusting of freckles on his cheek, the way his lips curved just slightly when he was thinking. Later, we took a break in the backyard. The sun was beginning to lower, casting long golden shadows over the lawn. I brought out a couple of lemonades and we sat on the steps, facing the overgrown garden. "This place has a quiet kind of beauty," Jason said, "even with the weeds." I smiled. "That's how I feel most days." He looked at me then, his expression unreadable. "I hope you know you're allowed to bloom again." There was something in his tone that made me inhale a little too sharply, like he wasn't just talking about the garden anymore, like he saw through the layers I hadn't realized I still wore. We sat there in silence for a long time, sipping lemonade, letting the breeze wrap around us. Then, with the sun dipping low, I stood to head inside. Jason followed. As we stepped back into the hallway, I stumbled slightly on one of the loose floorboards. He reached out instinctively, one arm around my waist, steadying me. "You okay?" he asked, his voice low. I nodded, breath catching slightly at how close we were. His hand still rested on my waist. My heart thudded louder than I cared to admit, but neither of us pulled away. I think I began, then stopped. I think I forgot what it feels like to be seen, to be held. Jason's eyes searched mine. "You deserve both, and not just in passing." The room felt heavy then, not with fear or confusion, but with unspoken truths. With the weight of emotion that had quietly grown between us in the days of boxes and old stories. Still, we didn't cross any lines. Not yet. But there was something in the way his fingers lingered as he let go. In the way he looked at me as he picked up his bag to leave. "I'll be back tomorrow," he said softly. "I know," I replied, standing in the doorway as he stepped out into the dusky evening. "I'll be here." When the door clicked shut, I stayed there a long while, the air still warm with everything unsaid. Something inside me had opened, a quiet, blooming ache I hadn't felt in years, and for the first time in a long time, I didn't feel afraid of it. The final day of the move came sooner than I thought it would. There were just a few boxes left, mostly sentimental things I hadn't had the heart to touch. The sun was already high when Jason arrived, his shirt a little wrinkled, his smile still easy. He brought no coffee or croissants this time, just himself, and somehow that felt like enough. "Morning," he said, stepping through the door. "Morning," I replied, my voice warmer than I expected. "You ready for the last round?" He nodded, but neither of us moved toward the stack of boxes right away. Instead, we found ourselves drifting to the kitchen again, as if needing one final moment of stillness before the weight of goodbye could take hold. We didn't speak much. It wasn't awkward. It was full. Like the air around us held all the things we hadn't dared to say aloud. After a few minutes, we finally returned to the living room. I gestured to a box by the window. "That one's full of old letters, from friends, from my husband, even from myself when I was younger. I haven't opened them in years." Jason crouched beside it, running a finger along the edge. "Letters are time machines. You ever read one and forget what year you're standing in?" "All the time," I said with a quiet smile. He looked up at me then, his gaze lingering. "You're not the same woman who stood in this room a few days ago." I tilted my head slightly. "No." He stood, his voice low. "No, you've been carrying so much in silence, but now it's like you're letting yourself exhale." I blinked, surprised by how accurate that felt. Like he'd watched my heart slowly unfolding without saying a word until now. Jason took a deep breath. "I've been thinking about something. About you. About this." He didn't elaborate, but I didn't rush him. I just listened. "I didn't expect this to happen," he said. "I thought I was helping my mom's coworker with a few boxes, but then I met you. And you weren't what I expected." I swallowed gently. "What did you expect?" "I don't know. Someone grateful, maybe. Kind. But you're more than that. You're smart, funny, strong, and beautiful in a way that makes people slow down without realizing it." I felt heat bloom in my chest, spreading outward. It had been years since someone spoke to me like that. Not just with flattery, but with truth, with clarity. I stepped closer to him, my fingers brushing the side of a box. "And what do we do with this? Now?" He looked at me for a long, silent moment. We don't rush it. We don't label it. We just give it room to exist. Whatever it is. I nodded. That felt right. Later, while loading the final boxes into my car, I watched him carefully stack them, his hands gentle even with the weight. He wasn't just moving things, he was honoring them. Like he understood they weren't just boxes, but containers for pieces of a life lived. When we finished, we stood together by the open trunk. The street was quiet, the air still. He turned to Tio and Sabine. Face me. So, this is it? He asked. Maybe, I said. Maybe not, you tell me. He smiled then, a small, genuine curve of his lips. Would it be strange if I asked to see you again? No boxes, no heavy lifting, just you and me. My heart, once cautious and curled in on itself, opened a little more. No, I said. It wouldn't be strange at all. He leaned in then, not to kiss me, but just to rest his forehead against mine. It was more intimate than anything else that could have happened. Quiet, grounded, true. When he pulled back, he brushed a strand of hair from my cheek. I'll call you. I'll be waiting, I whispered. He walked away slowly, the soft clink of his keys breaking the silence. And as he turned the corner, I stood there, sunlight spilling over my shoulders, heartful. That night in my new place, I sat surrounded by half-unpacked boxes and the smell of cardboard and lavender from a diffuser I'd just plugged in. I found my old paintbrushes again, set them on the table, and stared at a blank canvas. And for the first time in years, I didn't feel stuck. I didn't feel invisible. I felt seen. Not because someone had shown up and made me feel whole, but because he reminded me I already was. And that maybe, just maybe, something beautiful was beginning again, on the other side of goodbye.